LSU Tigers, Georgia Bulldogs. This is our SEC Championship game preview. You're listening to the SEC Recap Podcast. I am your host, Ben Warren. Make sure you listen all the way through for this one because we're going to give our predictions for the other Power 5 conference championships. If you're listening in audio form, please go to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating and review. We appreciate it so much. If you're listening on YouTube, please smash that like, that thumbs up, sub to the channel. Let me know what you think in the comments. A lot of people who don't agree with some of the things I say, they always let me know in the comments. Doesn't matter. Love you anyway. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at SEC Recap, and you can get all of our content at secrecap.com. Big one this weekend. LSU going to Atlanta under first-year head coach Brian Kelly, taking on the Georgia Bulldogs, defending national champs. The number 14 LSU Tigers will face the number 1 Georgia Bulldogs. Game is kicking off at 3 p.m. Central Time. It is the CBS game. Brian Kelly has really outperformed expectations in his first year at LSU. He's led the Tigers to a Western Division title and an opportunity to win the SEC Conference title. Kelly joins rare company, actually, as only the third coach in SEC history to win an SEC division title in his first year. It was last done by Gus Malzahn at Auburn in 2013. That was the infamous Kick 6 Iron Bowl year. But prior to Malzahn, Johnny Vaught, namesake of Vaught Hemingway Stadium at Ole Miss, was the first and only owner of that achievement, dating all the way back to 1947. Side note, Nick Saban and Kirby Smart both won SEC division titles in their second years, but not their first. Though it's Brian Kelly's first year at LSU, he is no stranger to success. He's certainly accustomed to playing in big games. As head coach at Cincinnati, his Bearcats appeared in the 2008 Orange Bowl and the 2009 Sugar Bowl. At Notre Dame, he led the Irish to a BCS National Championship appearance in 2012 against Alabama. More on that a little bit later. He also took teams to 2 Fiesta Bowls, a Cotton Bowl, a Citrus Bowl, and a Rose Bowl. Brian Kelly is 175-65 as a head coach at the Division I level, dating back to his time at Central Michigan. This is not including his time at Grand Valley State. He spent about 13 or 14 years there. That was D2. So dating back to his time at Central Michigan, when LSU brought Kelly to Baton Rouge for $9 million a year, they knew they were bringing in someone who would be a good football coach with a track record of success and leading teams on a big stage. That's exactly where Kelly will have his Tigers this Saturday. On the other side, Kirby Smart, in his 7th year as head coach of the Georgia Bulldogs, the guy owns 5 SEC Eastern Division titles, 1 SEC Conference title, and the 2021 College Football Playoff National Championship. Aside from an 8-5 overall record that ended with a win in the Liberty Bowl in 2016, Smart's first year, Kirby Smart and the Bulldogs have known nothing but dominance in the SEC, rivaled only by Nick Saban's Alabama powerhouse in the SEC West. The worst Georgia has ever finished in the SEC is second. That was in 2016 and 2020. They've appeared in the SEC championship game 5 times and won 1 of those. The Bulldogs have appeared in 2 national championship games and won once. That was last year. They also have Rose Bowl, Sugar Bowl, Orange Bowl, and Peach Bowl wins. Not just appearances, but wins. This is not the first time Kirby Smart has seen Brian Kelly on the field. Kirby Smart was the defensive coordinator at Alabama in 2012 when the Crimson Tide squared off with Brian Kelly's Fighting Irish in that aforementioned BCS National Championship game. That game was loaded on both sides with future NFL offensive talent. Theo Riddick, Tyler Eifert, TJ Yeldon, Eddie Lacy, Kenyon Drake, Amari Cooper, AJ McCarron. You get the idea. But it was Kirby Smart's punishing defense that held Kelly's Irish to just 14 points on 302 total yards, which included a paltry 32 yards rushing. That led Alabama to a blowout 42-14 victory over Notre Dame. Georgia has shown virtually every bit of the defensive dominance they asserted throughout its undefeated 2021 campaign, and having just wrapped up a second consecutive undefeated regular season, the Bulldogs are hungry for the SEC championship they missed out on last year when Bryce Young and the Alabama offense boat raced the Bulldogs 41-24. Brian Kelly and LSU have a tall task at hand, and they need their best performance of the season to upset 17.5-point favorite Georgia. But Georgia's been far from perfect this year, showing they can be stumped defensively. Does LSU have what it takes, or will the Bulldogs continue to chase a perfect season into the playoffs? Let's find out. LSU comes into this game with the number 39 offense in the country in terms of scoring offense, averaging 32.5 points per game, 433 yards per game, and about 31.5 minutes time of possession. They have the number 55 passing offense, averaging about 1.3 touchdowns a game on 240 yards. They've got 16 total passing touchdowns on the year. They have the number 35 rushing offense, about 2.8 touchdowns a game on 192 yards, 34 rushing tutties on the year. They're responsible for 4 interceptions and lost 11 out of 14 fumbles, so some turnover issues, especially in the ground game. Let's take a look at Georgia. Number 12 scoring offense in the country. Bulldogs average 38.3 points per game, 488 yards a game, and 33.5 minutes time of possession. Bulldogs have the number 18 passing offense, 285 yards a game through the air, 20 total passing touchdowns on the season. Not as many as they had last year. Stetson Bennett overall thrown for fewer passing touchdowns than he did a year ago. But in the ground game, the number 23 rushing offense, 203 yards a game, 35 rushing tutties on the year. 6 interceptions, lost 9 of 14 fumbles. Advantage offensively going to Georgia. Let's take a look at defense. LSU, number 36 scoring defense in the country, averaging 21.5 points allowed, 347 yards a game. They have the number 33 pass defense, allowing about 203 yards a game, and the number 59 rush defense, allowing 144 yards on the ground. They do have 6 interceptions and have recovered 10 fumbles, so a scrappy defense that can cause some turnover problems for opposing offenses. But Georgia, number 1 in the country in terms of scoring defense, allowing just 11 points per game and 270 yards. They have the number 22 pass defense. They're holding opponents under 200 yards a game at 191, only giving up 8 touchdowns through the air, and their run defense is rock solid at number 2 in the country, allowing just 79.5 yards a game. They have only given up 4 rushing touchdowns on the season. Meanwhile, that secondary has collected 8 interceptions and they've recovered 5 fumbles. Advantage defensively going again to Georgia. Key injuries in this game. For Georgia, I know A.D. Mitchell, wide receiver, is dealing with a lingering ankle issue. I think he's questionable. They've had a number of other players out, but they've been on the injury report for at least multiple weeks now, so not worth rehashing all of those injuries here. For LSU, a big one. Jaden Daniels, quarterback, something of an ankle injury. I mean, he's probable to play. I think it's very unlikely that Jaden Daniels does not play in this game, but he was hobbled a little bit last week against Texas A&M. He was spotted in a walking boot to help with an ankle sprain. Now, we're told that's not a high ankle sprain, which is extremely problematic, takes a long time to recover, often requires that tightrope surgery. But hopefully milder than that. Looks like he was just slightly hampered. We don't know how mobile he's going to be, though, but I think for sure Jaden Daniels plays in this game. So who are our key players going to be? Well, for LSU, of course, it's Jaden Daniels. I mean, he is the team's leading rusher. He's a top 10 rusher in the SEC, not just as a quarterback, but overall in terms of rushing yards. He is a big part of their offense with his legs. But if he can't be as mobile, he's going to need a lot of help from those LSU wide receivers. Malik Neighbors had a big season. Keyshawn Boutte has not had the season that people thought he would, but he's still very productive, and they're going to have to take shots downfield, especially if Jaden Daniels cannot move around like he's used to. On the Georgia side, I'm not going to name specific players here. Georgia has been so good all season. You can name Stetson Bennett. You can name Brock Bowers. You can name a ton of guys for Georgia. They've been consistently good week to week. But I'm going to change it up here and say that it's not a key player for Georgia, but it's a position group. I think the defensive line and Georgia's pass rush is going to be very key here in containing Jaden Daniels if he is fully healthy and mobile, and forcing him to stay in the pocket, especially in the red zone. We're going to look at a few more statistics in with some greater granularity here in just a moment. So what I think this game comes down to, number one, offensive line play. Georgia is tied for second nationally in fewest sacks allowed. They've only allowed 7 sacks on the season. That's best in the SEC. LSU is number 121. Over 12 games, they've allowed 41 sacks. The only team worse than that in the SEC is Kentucky. LSU is allowing almost 3.5 sacks a game. Now, protection has gotten better as the season has gone along, but you cannot play that porously on the offensive line in an SEC championship game. Georgia's defensive strength isn't the pass rush. They rank about 9th or 10th in the SEC in sacks and sack yards. But an LSU offensive line this porous will allow just about any pass rush to wreak havoc. Jaden Daniels is LSU's most productive runner and their rushing yards leader. At number 10 in the SEC, he's 7 spots ahead of Georgia's leading rusher, Kenny McIntosh, who is at number 17. This offensive line clearly isn't doing him any favors in pass pro, so it's no wonder why Jaden Daniels is always on the move. The primary concern for Georgia is that Jaden Daniels is really good on the move, and he's dangerous on the ground in the red zone. More on red zone scoring here in just a second, but first, LSU is going to have to be careful about blitzing when they're on defense. If you bring too many, you lose some of the ability to count for Georgia's tight ends, who, with such a size advantage, are going to probably beat you blocking and in the passing game. Then you leave yourself open to Stetson Bennett's ability to scramble as well. Georgia's offensive line has been good under pressure plays, so I'm not sure that's the most effective approach for LSU's defense. Now, back to red zone scoring. Number 2, what I think this game comes down to. LSU isn't as efficient in the red zone as Georgia, who is at number 1 nationally at 97% effectiveness. LSU is number 27 at 89.1%. LSU likes to use Jaden Daniels in the red zone. On 55 red zone attempts, the Tigers have 31 rushing touchdowns compared to just 9 passing touchdowns and 9 field goals. On the other hand, Georgia, on 66 red zone attempts, has 28 rushing touchdowns to 15 passing touchdowns and 21 field goals. To refine and clarify my point here, 31% of Georgia's red zone trips have ended in field goals. 16% of LSU's red zone trips have ended in field goals. This is precisely how LSU can frustrate the Georgia offense. LSU is more likely to score a touchdown in the red zone. So if they can hold Georgia to 2 or 3 field goals, they have a chance to keep it close. Earlier in the year, Mizzou held Georgia to 4 field goals in the red zone. Kentucky managed to hold the Bulldogs to 3 field goals in the red zone. Last week, Georgia Tech held the Bulldogs to 2 field goals in the red zone. LSU scores a higher percentage of touchdowns in the red zone than Georgia does. That's going to be one of their keys to success here. Let's take a look at the odds. ESPN's FPI has Georgia favored at an 83% chance to win versus LSU at a 17% chance to win. The spread favors Georgia. It's a big spread, 17.5, as does the money line at minus 900. The over-under at the time I'm recording this is 51, with team totals for Georgia at 34 and LSU at 16.5. Okay, I've got to give you a final prediction here, so let me work my way into it. Ultimately, LSU is going to need a near-perfect game, and I don't know how they're going to manage that. Plus, they're going to need Georgia to be off. LSU laid a big fat egg on the road at Texas A&M last week. I know Brian Kelly's a good coach. He'll have those guys ready to go, but they're going to need Georgia to be off, and I don't think there's a very high probability of that being the case. Kirby Smart always has his guys ready to go in big games. Georgia is going to get so much pressure on Jaden Daniels, and if Daniels is hobbled in any way by a bad ankle, there's such a low probability he's going to be able to beat Georgia through the air. Georgia has been too good against mobile quarterbacks this year to make me think even a fully mobile Jaden Daniels will be the difference maker in this game. Defensively, LSU can do some things other teams have done against Georgia to frustrate them offensively and hold them to field goals instead of touchdowns. But I believe at some point in the third or fourth quarter, if it hasn't happened before then, Georgia is just able to pull away, and LSU doesn't have the playmakers at key positions to keep up. Don't get me wrong, they have great playmakers at key positions, but they're not going to be able to keep up with Georgia. If Georgia gets ahead, they can just run it down LSU's throat. We've seen them do that all season. We saw Devon Achane do that on a number 83 ranked Texas A&M rushing offense against LSU last week. Texas A&M is near dead last in the FBS. They're like 100 or worse in the FBS in total offense. They have a number 83 ranked rushing offense. Not good. Devon Achane went for over 200 yards on LSU last week. We just saw them kind of run out of gas in that game. And unless they can throw the kitchen sink at Georgia offensively, I don't think the defense can do what it needs to do to really stop what Georgia's offense is going to do. Vegas has this at a 17.5 point game for a reason. I mean, that's a big spread for a championship game. Maybe LSU can keep it close into the third quarter, fourth quarter, but at some point, I just think you're going to see Georgia pull away. I'm not necessarily taking LSU to cover that 17.5 points because I think Georgia can still score late. So I'm taking Georgia 34, LSU 17. I don't think Georgia needs to run it up into the 40s here. They don't need to make a statement. They're already number one. If they win this game, they'll stay number one in the CFP rankings for Selection Sunday. So if they get a comfortable 2+ score lead, I think you're just going to see Georgia lean on that run game and run out the clock. Georgia 34, LSU 17. Dogs stay undefeated. They get the SEC championship that they missed out on last year, and they roll into the playoffs. All right, let's look at our other championship games. Starting on Friday, 7 p.m. game on Fox. This is the Pac-12 championship. Number 11, Utah at number 4, USC. I'm going to define this game as a lot of offense, not a lot of defense. Give me USC in a typical Pac-12 shootout. I think it will be closer than a lot of people are saying. I think this game comes in around USC 37, Utah 34. I think it's about a field goal difference there. Trojans stay undefeated. Ohio State still on the outside looking in. Then on Saturday, 11 a.m. game on ABC, Big 12 championship. Number 10, Kansas at number 3, TCU. Don't you love how they put Kansas in the top 10 just to kind of make this a top 10 championship matchup? A little bit of television magic there being worked. People who have picked against TCU have been disappointed week after week. But I'm going to do it this week. I'm not saying it's good for the CFP rankings, but I'm picking the upset. I think the committee gets their justification for putting Ohio State back in the top 4, even though they don't deserve it. A lot of people think that if TCU loses this game, they're going to stay in the top 4. I'm not so sure. I think it's going to come down to how big that margin of victory is. I'm still keeping it close. I'm saying Kansas State 31, TCU 28, and we'll see the drama play out on Selection Sunday. Big Ten Championship. This Saturday, it's the 7 p.m. game on Fox. Purdue, unranked Purdue, at number 2, Michigan. No chance. No chance the Spoilermakers get away with it this year. Give me Michigan 34, Purdue 17, and I think I'm being a little generous for Purdue there. Finally, same time slot, 7 p.m. This is the ABC game, ACC Championship, number 9, Clemson at number 23, North Carolina. Again, I think they kind of left North Carolina there in the top 25 just to kind of add some allure to this matchup. This is bad offense versus bad defense. Clemson has a bad offense. North Carolina has a bad defense. Who will win? Well, I don't like picking Clemson, but I guess I'm going to pick Clemson 31-27, and that's because what I really want to see is a Tennessee versus Clemson match in the Orange Bowl. I know there's a lot of drama with Ohio State wanting to opt out of the Rose Bowl and take the Orange Bowl instead. Not going to get into all that today. We'll see how that shakes out, but I think that would be an awesome Orange Bowl to get the 2 orange teams, Tennessee and Clemson, in there. That's going to do it for this episode. Guys, check out the other videos on my channel on YouTube. I know I'm not doing video yet. These are just in audio form. I'm best equipped to do audio, but I'm going to start doing some YouTube shorts, hopefully with these game previews, the bowl game previews, these championship previews very soon. We've also got basketball now in full swing. I'm looking forward to starting to pivot some of my stuff into basketball. Don't forget to give us a follow on Twitter at SEC Recap. Like, subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you're listening in podcast form on Spotify or Apple, leave us a rating and review. It helps us grow the show. Leave some comments under the videos. Let me know what you think. If you leave something negative or you call me an idiot, that's fine. I'll just tell you thanks for listening because I appreciate each and every one of you, no matter what you think of me. Guys, have a great week. Have a great weekend. It's championship weekend. I'll catch you on the next episode right here on the SEC Recap.